Nobody comes into the world hateful. Nobody's born a neo-Nazi or a white supremacist. So how does somebody end up in that world? And to answer that question, I'm going to take you back to my childhood. And I want you to think in your head about who you were at the age of 3 or 4. What was the core essence of who you came into the world to be? When I think of little Tony, I think of this bright, curious, mischievous, stubborn, and he was curious, open to the world, and sensitive. As we live our lives, we learn that it's not always safe to be those things, that it's not safe to be sensitive or curious, and we put on armor to hide parts of ourselves from pain. We wear masks to be someone we aren't in order to feel acceptance or to feel love. I grew up in an affluent neighborhood in Vancouver. My father was a doctor. He worked 80 hours a week. He was a fantastic provider. But I could never get enough of the one thing that I wanted from him, his time and attention, and his approval. But still, he was my idol, and I looked up to him. He was like a god to me. And at the age of 10, I walked in on him with another woman. And just like that, bang, the god fell off the pedestal. And I was filled with anger, rage, mistrust. I felt betrayed, and I even felt, bizarrely enough, guilty for what had happened. And my grades at the all-boys Catholic school went from an A and a B down to a C and a D. And the school tried all the carrots, and that didn't work. So they tried the stick. And with my parents' consent, in fact, their encouragement, if I didn't get an A or a B on major tests and assignments, I was walked down to his office and hit on the rear end with a yardstick. You ever been somewhere where you knew something really bad was about to happen and there was nothing you could do about it? I'd go into his office and I have to put my hands on his desk. He'd mumble something about, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. I'm not sure who that was meant to comfort, but it sure wasn't me. And he grabbed the meter stick and it was a whack, whack. And the first time it was 2, then it was 4, then it was 6, then it was 8. It was never more than 8 after that. It was in that office I was introduced to shame and powerlessness. And I think even to this day, I don't think I ever felt as powerless as I did in that office over and over and over again. I was 11. The stick didn't work, my grades didn't get any better, and I just became more and more defiant. I went from listening to Elton John and Queen to The Clash and the Sex Pistols. I got really into the punk music because the anger and the defiance and the energy and the rebellion of that music really vibed with me. And I continued my rebellion against everything and everyone that was an adult. And in high school, I went to 3 high schools in 4 years, including a stint at an English boarding school, where I first came into contact with skinheads. And they terrified me. I remember back in Vancouver getting involved in the punk scene and getting into that whole scene. And I met skinheads there. And those skinheads, although they terrified me, I was drawn to them. My bullying survival strategy was befriend the bully, become the bully. And that's what I did. There was safety in the eye of the hurricane. And in order to have their protection, I had to have their respect. And in order to have their respect, I had to commit all the same actions of violence they did. And I did so willingly. And I tell you what, not being on the receiving end of pain and not feeling powerless, doing that to somebody else was intoxicating. And then when things started to go into white supremacy and the politics, I gladly went there, because the more notoriety we got, the more people feared us, the more powerful we felt. It's an illusion of power, but I still felt it. And I went down that journey, and I ended up even at Aryan Nations in Idaho and getting involved with some of the most notorious pause for a second. Got involved with some of the most notorious neo-Nazi groups in the country. So what does research say about all of this? 15% of the American population has two childhood events, adverse childhood events. So let me re-say that. 15% of the American population has 2 adverse childhood events in their history. When they looked at a violent extremist population, 66% had 4 or more. So what is it that trauma does? And it can be the physical type. It can be physical or sexual abuse, but often it's the emotional type. It's abandonment, it's neglect. There's an old Buddhist saying that says, all suffering comes from either getting something you don't want or not getting something you do want. And it took me a long time to figure this out, but so much of our pain comes from not getting something from someone who's incapable of giving it in the first place. How crazy is that? So trauma leaves a mark on us. Trauma informs a young person about who they are, and it poisons our sense of self. It's an alienation of the self, and it sits deep in our subconscious, and our subconscious identity belief system that we hold about ourselves, and we believe these lies, that we're not smart enough, we're not good enough, we're not worthy, we're not lovable, we're powerless, we're weak. And we go out into the world and live our lives in reaction to that. Some people become perfectionists to hide the flaws. Some people become overachievers to hide the flaws. Some people become gifted underachievers to live up to the lie. I chose an ideology that said I was greater than to mask the fact that I felt less than. Toxic shame is the secret that we hide from the world, but we also internalize it. Toxic shame is the dirty secret we hide from ourselves. Cutting, substance abuse. There's a myriad of ways in which we distract and numb ourselves so we don't feel that pain. So if shame is at the root of the problem, how can more shame be part of the solution? It can't. You can give people that are acting out their shame your derision, but it doesn't matter to them. They already hate themselves already. So what is the cure? What is the antidote to toxic shame? And the answer is compassion. Through compassion, we go from dehumanization to rehumanization. What's the word that's the opposite of shame? Pride. I'm proud of my race. Ever hear of the Proud Boys? I'll tell you what happened to me. I'll show you my story. I was 25, and I found myself in the delivery room holding this beautiful little baby girl. And she's her face scrunchy and she's going like that, and she hasn't opened her eyes yet. And she's so fragile, and I'm afraid I'm going to do something wrong and I'm going to break something, and I'm terrified. And she opens her eyes, and my face is the first picture her brain takes. And I connected to another human being for the first time since I couldn't remember when, because I was completely closed off from my heart. I couldn't feel anything. Somebody asked me once, Tony, how did you lose your humanity? I didn't lose it. I traded it for acceptance and approval until there was nothing left. But for the first time ever, I started to make decisions with somebody else in mind, other than myself, because I was a total narcissist. And I had a son born 15 months later, and I got to parent them the way that I always wanted to be parented, and it was cathartic. And you know what's amazing about children's love? It's infectious. It's infectious. And another thing about children's love is it's safe. And I allowed myself to begin a thawing process. It wasn't a come to Jesus moment. It wasn't the road to Damascus moment. And I allowed myself to thaw and move from my head into my heart, because it's safe to love a child. They're not capable of rejection. They're not capable of shaming. They're not capable of ridicule till they're about 13, and that's all they want to do. My children had no idea what the word compassion was or what it looked like or how to spell it. Yet that's what they gave to me. When we're compassionate with someone, we hold a mirror up and allow them to see their humanity reflected back at them. I could see the magnificent person that they saw reflected through their faces. I couldn't see that when I looked in the mirror. I didn't think I was a magnificent person, but I could see it in their face and in their eyes. When they were 4 and 6, I became a full-time single father, and that put me in a bit of a spell because I could barely take care of my own life, never mind theirs. And I needed the help of my mother, and she taught me 2 very important lessons about compassion. Her love for me was unconditional, but her relationship with me was very conditional. And she used that to leverage me to leave the movement behind. healthy boundaries and consequences, when it's paired with compassion, is a powerful combo. And sometimes it's like tough love, giving someone what they need instead of what they want. The other thing that it taught me, and I figured this out later on, was it's very important that we call people out, but as a society, we also have to be able to call people in. I left the movement in 1998, but the movement hadn't left me. I hadn't healed any of the wounds, any of the anger, and I just want to be very clear here. Everything I did, I chose to do. I don't make an excuse for that. And I have to hold myself accountable and be accountable for that. Everything I did, I chose to do. But I share with you stuff from my childhood so you understand the lens through which I made those choices. And understanding is the first step towards healing. As I left the movement behind, there's this great quote by Franciscan friar Richard Rohr. And it's, if we do not transform our pain, we will most assuredly transmit it. And I was still transmitting it, but I wasn't in the movement anymore. I started a new career in 2004, and I got a new group of I got a new social circle of friends. And I started doing these personal development workshops, and as I did them, things were really starting to improve in my life. And the guy who did the courses, a guy named Dov Barron, he's English. I was born in Liverpool. He was born in Manchester. He's about 10 years older, and we bonded over quirky things like Monty Python. My friend who'd introduced us about 8 months after starting these courses hands me an envelope. And I take the envelope, and I open it up excited because it's my birthday. And I pull out the card, gift certificate, for a one-on-one counseling session with Dov. Great, who doesn't want therapy for their birthday? So I found myself sitting on the couch in his office, and I've told why I'm angry at my dad, why I'm angry at my mom, why I'm angry at the world, and everyone's to blame. And I go, do I tell him the rest? Do I tell him about being a neo-Nazi and Aryan nations and being a Holocaust denier? And I'm staring at the carpet, hoping the pattern is going to give me a gem of wisdom as to what to do next. And he's like, mate, just let it out. Whatever you got to say. We're on the clock here. And I look at the carpet on the other side of the room and hoping it's going to give me some answer, and it doesn't. And he goes, mate, you look like you're trying to swallow 3 golf balls. Just let it out. And in a moment of courage and vulnerability, I decided to go for it. And out it came, the skinhead, neo-Nazi, Aryan nations, and all that. And the more I tell him, the more he starts smiling. And the more he starts smiling, the more angry I'm getting. Like, here I am in my first counseling session, this guy's laughing at me. I said, what's so funny? So he leans in with a big Cheshire Cat grin and says, you know I was born Jewish, right? And of course. And I sit back in my chair. My cheeks are flushed with shame. Here's this man who loves me, wants to heal me, wants to heal my family. You know, here I am, sitting back in the chair knowing that I'd once advocated for the annihilation of him and his people. And he said to me, that's what you did. That's not who you are. I see you. I see little Tony. And with that, I began sobbing. With that, I began a magnificent journey towards the pain, towards the wounds that I've been running away from my entire life. And I just want to say here, I'm not for a second suggesting that it's the responsibility of people of color and marginalized communities to take this work on. I'm not. But it is a very powerful gift should you choose to practice. The reason I tell this story is to show you the transformative power of compassion and the seemingly impossible gulfs it can overcome. And as I got to know little Tony and connect to my own humanity, I began to recognize the humanity in others better. And the more I recognized the humanity in them, the more I could see my own humanity. And I went down this journey of mutual understanding to got to a place where I could see myself in the other and the other in me. We have to be curious about ourselves and who we are. And when our curiosity leads us to a new understanding of ourselves, an opportunity to choose something and be someone different arises. And with that choice comes responsibility. Because whether we like it or not, we influence, inspire, and give people permission to act, whether it's good or bad, depending on what we do. I spent 15 years chasing a false ideology, trying to change the world out there to solve my pain in here. And it didn't work, of course not. What I've learned in that journey is the more I change the world in here, the more power I have to change the world out there. We change the world out there by changing what's in here. It starts with us. Who we choose to be in every moment of every day sends a message to the world how to be. So I'm going to challenge you, and I'm not suggesting for a second that you have to go on some massive transformation or you have to put yourself in danger or do something crazy. Just start with a simple act of courage. Do an act of kindness and compassion to someone who you feel doesn't deserve it. Try that. It doesn't take a lot. We have to step out of our comfort zone because the amount of intolerance and polarization in the society is not going to be fixed from inside our comfort zone. We need courage. We need curiosity. And we need compassion. And we need to inquire within. I want to ask you to go home and answer this. Look at all your behaviors and beliefs and ask yourself, is that the same as one of my parents? Is it the opposite of one of my parents? Or is it actually mine? Because we all have to do this. It starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with us. Thank you.